I always believed I was a perceptive man. In my line of work, you have to be. I build things, custom furniture, and it requires an eye for the smallest details, the grain of the wood, the alignment of a joint, the precise pressure needed for a perfect glue-up. I thought that same attention to detail applied to my marriage. I thought I knew the landscape of my wife's face, the rhythms of her heart, as well as I knew the feel of sanded maple. But I was wrong. The biggest crack in the foundation of my life appeared, and I was too busy looking at the wallpaper to notice the wall was crumbling. It began, I suppose, not with a dramatic event, but with a series of small, almost imperceptible shifts. The first thread I unconsciously tugged on was the perfume. Sarah had worn the same scent for a decade, a fresh, clean fragrance with hints of lily and pear. It was the smell of home, of her warmth beside me in bed, of the ghost of her presence left on a sweater she'd borrowed. Then, one evening when I kissed her cheek as she was heading out for a girls' night, I noticed it was different. This was deeper, spicier, a scent that seemed designed for dimly lit rooms and hushed conversations, not for laughing with friends over cocktails. When I mentioned it, her smile was a little too quick, her answer a little too smooth. "Oh, it's a sample from that new boutique downtown. Marian insisted I try it. Do you like it?" I told her it was nice, but that I missed her old smell. She just patted my arm and said, "Change is good, Tom. It keeps you young." And that was that. The door to a suspicion I didn't even know I should have was nudged open, just a crack. Then came the phone. It became an extension of her hand, but with a new, possessive secrecy. She'd always been on it, sure, scrolling through social media or reading articles, but now it had a different energy. A text would chime with a specific, unique tone I didn't recognize, and she'd snatch it up, her body curving slightly away from me, her thumbs flying across the screen. If I walked into the room, the phone would be set face down on the table with a finality that felt like a slap. I'd try to make a joke of it. "Who's so important they can't wait until morning?" She'd brush it off with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Just work stuff, honey. You know how Jeff is, always emailing at all hours." Jeff was her boss. I'd met him at the company Christmas party, a jovial, backslapping kind of guy with a loud laugh. The idea seemed ridiculous. Girls' nights and late work meetings became more frequent. The fabric of our shared life, once so tightly woven, began to fray at the edges. Our Saturday morning rituals of making pancakes together were replaced by her yoga classes. Our quiet evenings watching movies on the couch were interrupted by her needing to run to the office to finish a presentation. I felt like I was living with a ghost, a beautiful, smiling phantom who was just passing through our home. I started to doubt myself. Was I being clingy? Was I suffocating her? Maybe I hadn't been a good enough husband. I worked long hours in my workshop. Maybe she was lonely. I began to try harder. I bought her flowers, I planned a weekend getaway, I made her favorite meals. She accepted it all with a distracted gratitude, like you'd accept a compliment from a stranger. The distance between us wasn't just growing. It was becoming a chasm, and I was on one side, shouting across, while she had already built a bridge to somewhere else and quietly crossed over. The day the truth finally stared me in the face, it was a Tuesday. A utterly ordinary, boring Tuesday. She said she was working late, a last-minute client dinner. I'd been in my workshop, finishing a cherrywood desk for a client, my hands covered in sawdust and my mind focused on the task. I decided to pack up early and surprise her. I'd get takeout from that Thai place she loved, the one I always complained was too spicy, and we could have a late dinner together. I called her phone, but it went straight to voiceline. Probably dead, I thought. Typical Sarah. I drove to her office building downtown. The lights on her floor were dark. A cold, hollow feeling started to form in my stomach. I called the restaurant she'd mentioned, a nice Italian place. I asked if a reservation was under her name or the company. The polite hostess told me no, they had no reservation under that name for tonight. The hollow feeling turned into a lead weight. I sat in my truck, the silence pressing in on me. This was it. The moment of confrontation I had been subconsciously avoiding for weeks. I started driving, not with any real destination, just driving, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. And then I saw it. Her car. Parked not outside a restaurant or an office, but in the lot of a small, quiet park on the other side of town, a place we never went. And next to it was a familiar, sleek black SUV. Jeff's car. I didn't park, I just slowed down, my truck crawling past the entrance. And there they were, under the soft glow of a street lamp near a picnic bench. They weren't kissing. They weren't even touching. They were just standing close, too close, and he was laughing, his head thrown back, and she was smiling up at him with a look I hadn't seen on her face in years. It was a look of unguarded, effortless joy, a look she used to reserve for me. In that single, silent, heartbreaking moment, the entire fragile illusion of our life together shattered. The sawdust, the perfume, the late nights, the face-down phone, it all crystallized into one brutal, undeniable truth. My wife, the woman I had built a life with for 15 years, was in love with someone else. The world didn't end with a scream. It ended with the soft crunch of my tires on gravel as I drove away, a ghost in my own life, finally seeing the haunting for what it was. The pain was immediate, a physical ache in my chest, but right on its heels, cold and hard and surprising in its intensity, came something else. A resolve. This would not be the end of my story. This would be the beginning of theirs, and I would make sure it was a story they would come to regret. The silence in the truck on the drive home was a physical presence, thick and suffocating. It was broken only by the sound of my own heart, a dull, painful thud against my ribs. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind, which had been a chaotic storm of pain and confusion, suddenly becoming preternaturally calm. It was the calm of the deep ocean, where light doesn't reach and pressure can crush steel. The initial, searing agony had been cauterized by a cold, absolute certainty. The man I was, the trusting, loving, slightly oblivious husband, had died in that parking lot. What was left was something else, something simpler and far more dangerous. I walked into our house, our home that was now just a structure filled with lies. I could still smell her new perfume in the air, a scent that now felt like a poison. I went straight to my workshop in the garage, the one place that had always been my sanctuary. The smell of sawdust and tung oil usually grounded me, but tonight it felt different. The tools, my chisels, my planes, my clamps, they were no longer just instruments for creation. They were extensions of my will, and my will had shifted from building to dismantling. I sat on a stool, surrounded by the silent skeletons of half-finished furniture, and I began to plan. This wasn't going to be a crime of passion. There would be no screaming match, no dramatic confrontation where I threw her infidelity in her face. That would give her the upper hand. It would allow her to craft a narrative, to play the victim, to spin her betrayal into a story of a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage seeking solace. No, I would not give her that satisfaction. My revenge would not be loud and messy. It would be quiet, precise, and utterly devastating. I would not break her heart. I would dismantle the life she had built with him, brick by brick, and I would use the very trust she had broken as my primary tool. The first step was intelligence. I needed to know everything. Their schedule, their methods, the depth of the deception. I became a ghost in my own life, an observer. I was more attentive, more agreeable. When she came home that night, full of fabricated stories about a difficult client and a dead phone, I simply nodded, handed her a cup of tea, and said, "You must be exhausted." The lie was a tangible thing between us, but I acted as if I were blind to it. I started taking notes, not on paper, but in my mind. I noted the days she wore the new perfume. I noted the times Jeff's name came up in conversation, always with a casual, dismissive tone that was meant to throw me off the scent. I started volunteering for errands that would take me near her office or his neighborhood, building a map of their movements in my head. I also began to safeguard my own world. My business, my savings, my assets. Our finances were mostly joint, a testament to a trust that was now ash. Slowly, methodically, I began to separate them. I consulted a lawyer, a discreet, sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn Ross, under the guise of estate planning. I laid out the situation without the heat of emotion, just the cold facts. She listened, her expression neutral, and then laid out a path that was both legal and brutal in its efficiency. "The key," she said, "is patience and documentation. We need proof, and we need to ensure your financial position is secure before she knows you know." So I played my part. I was the supportive, slightly distracted husband. I worked in my workshop. I made dinner. I asked about her day and listened to the lies with a sympathetic smile. It was the hardest performance of my life. Every affectionate gesture from her felt like a violation. Every laugh was a mockery, but I endured it because I had a goal. I was building my masterpiece, not from wood, but from their own deceit. breakthrough came a month later. Sarah was in the shower, and her phone, the holy grail of her secret life, was left charging on the kitchen counter. It buzzed. A text preview flashed on the screen from Jay. It was a time and a place. The usual spot, tomorrow at 1 p.m. Can't wait. My blood ran cold, but my mind was clear. This was my opportunity. I had already, weeks prior, used a forgotten shared password to enable cloud backups for her phone to an old tablet I had in my workshop. It was a long shot, but it had paid off. I now had access to a treasure trove of their digital intimacy, whispered plans, silly pet names, the entire architecture of their double life. I didn't read it all. I didn't need to. I just collected it, saving it to a secure, encrypted drive my lawyer had recommended. Each message, each photo of them smiling in a cafe I'd never been to, was another nail in the coffin of their relationship. I knew where the usual spot was, a small, out-of-the-way boutique hotel about 30 minutes away. The day of their meeting, I was already there. I sat in a coffee shop across the street, a newspaper open in front of me unseen. I watched him arrive first, Jeff with his confident stride and expensive coat. Then I saw her, my wife, practically skipping into his arms as he held the door open for her. The sight should have shattered me, but it didn't. It just fueled the cold engine of my resolve. This was the end of the beginning. I had the proof. I had the plan. The foundation for their downfall was laid. Now it was time to start construction. I finished my coffee, folded my newspaper, and drove away. I didn't go home. I went to my workshop. I had a very special project to start. It was a jewelry box made from a beautiful piece of walnut I'd been saving for years. It was intricate, with hidden compartments and a delicate, locking mechanism. I was going to give it to her for her birthday, a beautiful, empty box, a perfect metaphor for our marriage. And by the time she received it, she would understand exactly what it meant. The game was on, and they didn't even know they were playing. The final act of my marriage began not with a shout, but with the gentle click of a lock. The jewelry box was complete. It was the finest piece I had ever made, the walnut polished to a deep, warm glow, the hidden compartments seamless and undetectable. It was a beautiful prison for nothing. I placed it on the dining room table on the morning of her birthday. Next to it, I propped a simple card. It read, "For all the things you've kept hidden, happy birthday." She saw it when she came down for coffee, her eyes still soft with sleep. She let out a gasp of genuine delight, her fingers tracing the intricate inlay. "Tom, it's breathtaking," she whispered. She missed the meaning in the card's message entirely, her guilt apparently not extending to parsing subtext. She spent minutes opening and closing it, marveling at the craftsmanship, completely unaware that it was a replica of the prison I had been living in for months. She didn't find the hidden compartments. She didn't understand that the most complex mechanism of all was the trap I had built around her. The party was that evening. Our house was filled with friends, family, her colleagues. Jeff was there, of course, the life of the party, his laugh booming through the rooms, his hand occasionally brushing against Sarah's arm with a familiarity that everyone else mistook for friendly boss energy. I played the gracious host, refilling drinks, laughing at jokes, all while feeling like a conductor waiting for the symphony to reach its crescendo. The moment came during the gift-giving. Sarah, flushed with wine and attention, was gushing over the gifts. She held up the jewelry box I had made for everyone to see. "And this, Tom made this for me. Isn't it incredible?" There was a chorus of oohs and ahs. Jeff raised his glass. "To the talented husband," he said, his voice slick and condescending. I smiled, a thin, tight smile. "Thank you, Jeff, but you know a piece like that has its secrets. The beauty is often hidden." I walked over to Sarah, my heart a cold, steady drum in my chest. "Here, honey, let me show you." I took the box from her. The room was watching. I pressed a nearly invisible seam on the underside. A small, thin drawer, no wider than a finger, silently slid out. Inside was not a piece of jewelry. It was a single, folded piece of paper. Her smile faltered. Confusion flickered in her eyes. "What's that?" "Open it," I said, my voice calm and low, but carrying in the sudden quiet of the room. She unfolded the paper. It was a printout of a bank statement, not from our joint account, but from a new, separate account I had opened months prior. I had been quietly siphoning off half of our shared savings, the funds from my recent large commissions, everything I could legally claim. The balance was substantial, more than substantial. It was freedom. Her face went pale. "Tom, what is this?" "That," I said, my voice still conversational, as if we were discussing the weather, is my new beginning. I've taken the liberty of securing my share of our assets. The house, as you know, is in my name from before we were married. My business is solely mine. Everything is perfectly legal. My lawyer, Evelyn Ross, has all the paperwork ready. The name Evelyn Ross meant nothing to the guests, but I saw Jeff's face drain of all color. He knew the name. Evelyn Ross was a shark, known for her ruthlessness in high-stakes divorces. The room was utterly silent. You could hear the ice melting in someone's glass. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I think you do," I said, my eyes locking with hers. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet precision of my words was more devastating than any scream. "I know about the usual spot. I know about the perfume he buys for you. I know about the text messages, the client dinners that never were. I've known for months." Her composure shattered. The beautiful, smiling facade crumbled into sheer, unadulterated panic. She looked from me to Jeff, who was now staring fixedly at his shoes, looking every bit the coward he was. "This is crazy," Jeff blustered, trying to reclaim control. "Tom, you're embarrassing yourself." I turned my gaze to him. "Am I, Jeff? Then you won't mind if I ask you about the company's financial protocols. Specifically, the misuse of corporate funds for personal travel and gifts. You see, while Sarah was distracted, I had a very interesting conversation with your company's HR and the board chairman. It seems expense reports for client entertainment at boutique hotels are being heavily scrutinized, especially when the client is another employee's wife." The blood left his face completely. He looked like a man who had just walked off a cliff. His career, his reputation, it was all evaporating in the warm, festive air of my dining room. The party broke up quickly after that, a flood of mumbled apologies and averted eyes. The truth hung in the room, ugly and undeniable. Sarah was left sobbing on the couch. Jeff slunk out without another word. The divorce was swift and brutal. Evelyn Ross was every bit as efficient as promised. With the evidence I provided, Sarah had no leverage. She received only what the law minimally required, which wasn't much. There was no messy fight, no drawn-out drama. I had preempted it all. My revenge was not a single act of violence, but a series of calm, administrative strokes that erased her from my life and dismantled the one she had tried to build with him. I heard through the grapevine that Jeff was fired within the week. An internal audit confirmed the misuse of funds, and his reputation was ruined. He and Sarah tried to make a go of it for a few months, but a relationship built on lies and shattered by financial and public ruin doesn't have a strong foundation. It collapsed under the weight of its own disgrace. As for me, I sold the house. The memories there were ghosts I no longer wished to live with. I moved my workshop to a larger, brighter space on the other side of town. The first piece I built there was a large, solid oak desk for myself, clean of lines and utterly honest in its construction. One afternoon, about a year later, I was sanding the edge of a table when the bell on my shop door chimed. It was Sarah. She looked older, tired. The light in her eyes that I had once loved was gone, extinguished. "Tom," she said, her voice quiet. I didn't stop working. The rhythmic sound of sandpaper on wood filled the space between us. "Sarah." I wanted to say I'm sorry." The words sounded hollow, worn out from overuse. I looked up then, meeting her gaze. There was no anger left in me, no hatred, just a vast, peaceful emptiness. "I know," I said, "but sorry doesn't rebuild a life, it just acknowledges the wreckage." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "He left me, lost his job, his money, everything." "I heard," I said, returning to my work. The sanding created a fine, smooth surface, erasing the rough spots. It was a good metaphor. She stood there for a moment longer, a ghost from a past life, before turning and walking out. The bell chimed again, and she was gone. I finished sanding the edge, running my fingers over the wood. It was perfectly smooth. The revenge was complete. It hadn't been about hurting her, not really. It had been about reclaiming myself. I had taken the pain, the betrayal, and the anger, and I had used them as tools. I had dismantled the life they broke and used the pieces to build a new one, stronger and truer, for myself. And in the quiet of my new workshop, surrounded by the honest smell of wood and varnish, I was finally and completely free.